Okay, good afternoon, evening to everyone out there that's attended movies, that seen movies at the festivals, and this is our second continuing portion of our drop series that we're doing with the Rox Film Festival. If anyone's out there that was there for Monday's in-person and virtual festival, thank you for joining us again. I'm here with three filmmakers, Soren Sorensen, Bestor Cram, and David Weathersby. I'm just going to give you a little back story on them. Soren Sorensen is an award-winning filmmaker and educator specializing in documentary film and television with an emphasis on social and cultural issues. His first feature-length documentary film, My Father's Vietnam, 2016, combines interviews and never seen before photographs and 8mm footage of era to tell a story of three soldiers, only one of whom returned home from the Vietnam War alive. The film premiered at the 2015 Rhode Island International Film Festival, where it won the Soldier and Sacrifice Grand Prize. My Father's Vietnam is currently available on streaming, on-demand platforms, and on Blu-ray and DVD. Sorensen's short documentary with Dad is based on a book from the same name by American photographer Stephen Dorado. The film features conversations with Dorado and numerous examples of his work, specifically during the painful 20-year period of his father's decline and eventual death from Alzheimer's disease. The film premiered at the 2020 Rhode Island International Film Festival, where it won Youth Jury First Prize for Best Short Documentary. The film also won awards in 2020 at the Houston International Film Festival, the Massachusetts Independent Film Festival, and the Mystic Film Festival. In 2021, with Dad, won 2 awards for Best Short Documentary and Best Editing at the Red Dirt Film Festival in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Sorensen's second feature-length documentary, Omar's 88 Well-Tuned Drums, has its world premiere at the 2022 USA Film Festival in Dallas, Texas, and won Best of Festival feature documentary at the 2022 Massachusetts Independent Festival. Welcome, Soren. Next up, we have Bestor Cram. Bestor Cram is an established producer, director, cinematographer of nonfiction films for television and museums. Following a staff position at the MIT section, he founded Northern Light Productions in 1983. The work is on display at museums and visitor centers, including the September 11th Memorial and Museum, various museums of the Smithsonian Institute and the Illinois Holocaust Museum, and James Madison Montclair. Bestor's recent feature documentary work includes The Last American Colony, One Man's Revolution, Gary K., One Step at a Time, Revealed, The Hunt for Bin Laden, The Birth of a Movement, and JFK, The Last Speech. As producer, director, cinematographer, he has just released Bonnie Blue, James Cotton's Life in the Blues. Bestor Cram serves as the president of the International Quorum of the Motion Picture Producer and board member of the Massachusetts Producer Coalition and FILMA. He has taught at the Maine Media Workshop for 30 years and lectures at New England universities. Nice to have you here again.
Good to be here. Thanks so much.
David Weathersby is a filmmaker, videographer, and founder of the City Vanguard, an arts organization that helps independent filmmakers create community-based documentaries for educational and cultural institutions. As a director and screenwriter, he has produced films, documentaries, concert DVDs, music videos, and video art projects. His past projects include the documentary Got the Love, Jazz Occurrence, and The Color of Art. His work has been featured on the Africa Channel, WTTW, and various film festivals, including Black Harvest Film Festival, Image Union Film Festival, and the Chicago Short Comedy Film Festival. Welcome all. Thank you for being here again. We had a great time on Monday. I was pretty excited to kind of see you guys again. We've had a long week, and hope you guys got some rest for everything that's going on, but it's definitely been pretty exciting. These three films, I know we covered a lot on Monday, and I think the general question for the film, I'll just ask you guys again, is really like, what inspired you to make this film that we can share with the folks out there? So individually, I think Bestor, you're up on my screen. What inspired you to make this film?
Well, I think inspiration for independent filmmakers is in some respects driven by both your own personal interests, but also your understanding of what is missing in the world. And part of what we have is we have the privilege in the work that we do to kind of enter into worlds we both know, but also worlds we don't know. And that's kind of what attracts us, as I think, as filmmakers, is to become educated and to share what we learn and what we feel and what we understand. So the inspiration for me always comes through that knowledge of, I'm going to go on a journey into a world that I don't know. And James Cotton was not a world that I knew in an intimate way. And so the opportunity to go and explore James Cotton's life was an opportunity to look across sort of 5, 6, 7 decades of life in America, and how James Cotton's life both paralleled the upheavals and the changes and the transformations that took place, but also how he became a progenitor of a type of music that in some respects, shapes the rest of music that we know today. And as a blues musician, he was right at the forefront of transitioning from the Delta blues into Chicago blues and into essentially a rock and roll blues adaptation. And as part of that, that just it gives you an opportunity to think about a whole host of different ideas and issues, and to become familiar with somebody who you admire.
That's awesome. How about you, David?
For me, doing this documentary is it all stems back when I first kind of moved to the Chicago area. Everywhere else I saw, when it comes to dance and dance music culture, it was like hip hop and everything else. And when I got to Chicago, I got to see how strong house music was and its relationship with house and hip hop. And to me, it wasn't just a matter of taste. It was a matter of the community having autonomy over what they had culturally. They weren't allowing mainstream media to tell them what they were deciding on what they were going to listen to and what was popular, besides, Chicago being the home of house. And I thought that was fascinating. I thought it went beyond just these people like different genres of music. These were their flags, these were their tribes, this was their communities. And they, sometimes they butted heads, sometimes they complimented each other. And it was all really within the borders of Chicago. A lot of people didn't realize it, and how they kind of both sides defined themselves while competing and complimenting each other. So I thought that was fascinating. I'd never seen it before, and I thought it was something that should be highlighted, because to me, it's a metaphor for the power of having autonomy over your own culture.
Awesome. How about you, Soren Sorensen?
Yeah, well, I this is a sort of this film is a names Omar Sosa in its title, so it's largely about Omar Sosa, but it's also about this vast community of collaborators that he has. And the original impetus for making it came from a conversation, an hour-long Skype conversation I had with him for a freelance writing assignment for a now defunct publication called Tribe Magazine, based here in Providence. We sort of hit it off, for lack of a better term. It was sort of easy to talk to. He's a generous person with his time and with his energy, and he's a great character, for lack of a better term. Again, I teach documentary at Clark University every fall, and I find myself having to remind students that making a short documentary, which is what they're doing, they have to find good characters, just like a narrative screenwriter or a narrative filmmaker has to find good characters. And Omar's a great character. That's one thing. And then of course the music spoke to me. But when I had these initial conversations with him and realized not only how different we are, but also how similar we were in our tastes. So to grow up in a different way than he did. He of course grew up in Cuba. He's 10 years older than I am, but we both appreciate and love a lot of the same music. And so having an easy conversation with somebody from a completely different background, this kind of highlighted this universal language that music and film are. And I figured if I can't make a film out of this guy's life, I have no business making a film about anybody's life.
Wow. Yeah, that was definitely all three films, I'd have to say, and I had an opportunity to actually watch them again since Monday, because I just got more intrigued from listening to you guys tell your story on how you kind of drove to you've got to the point of wanting to make this film, which was actually really cool to hear from you directly versus what I had in my mind of like what could have been going on and things like that. And just to apologize, because I didn't introduce myself. My name is Malik Williams. I'm a composer, producer, music supervisor, filmmaker. I'm here in the Boston area. I grew up in Dorchester, Roxbury area. I'm a board member of the Secret Society of Black Creatives, along with Vladimir Minuti, Narissa Williams, and Evelyn Brittle. So I want to say hello and hey from them, because they wish they could be here as well. So anyway, so Soren, since I have you, it's very interesting because when the film starts, right, I was trying to figure out what is this about? Like, what is this guy doing? Afro-Cuban. The music he was playing at the beginning wasn't very signature to anything, right? So it literally was like, and that's why I appreciated the film more as I sat there and said, okay, like, what is this? Like, I'm a music person, but it's not like, I'm not getting it right away based off of what I saw and what I thought I knew of him, right? Which is a very, very cool thing. One of the other things is, on Monday we talked about like the adverse environment, and experiences and history that all three of these films kind of talked about. You use the Greta animation, I think it's called Greta animation.
Yeah.
And I thought that was very interesting because the stories that were being told with those animations were really pretty hardcore. What made you do that? What made you use that animation to tell the story in those segments?
Yeah, I mean, at the top of the film, there's a piano improvisation, and it's called Sunrise. It's from his record Calma, which is a solo set, one of several sets of solo piano improvisations that he has in his discography. And he would just go into a studio and kind of just start playing, and he would, obviously there's some editing and culling and repetition and trying to figure out, okay, I've got this idea, what can I do with it? But I thought Sunrise was a good place to start. But if you listen to that piece, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's very nondescript. It's very ambient. I like to, again, another quote that I always bring up to my students is Brian Eno said at some point, I'm paraphrasing, that ambient music should be as interesting as it is ignorable. So it's like it's one of those things, like that piece of music would be just as fascinating to put on kind of in the background of a dinner party, or you could sit with headphones and really scrutinize it, right? But it's not jazz and it's not Latin music. It doesn't sound like salsa or Cuban music or like that. So yeah, it's like, so what is this guy all about? And I think critics don't like that about him. I think if you ask the critic what they want in an artist, they want somebody to be versatile and they want them to transcend genres and all that stuff. But when composers actually try to do that, they're like, well, stay in your lane, you're Cuban, make Cuban music, kind of thing. It's in terms of the animation, bringing parts of his story to life. That was just, there were two things. The animation's really time consuming and really expensive for an independent film. Most of what we raised crowdfunding went toward that animation, because I thought at the beginning I could probably get away with only doing like 2 or 3 minutes, and it ended up being, it ended up ballooning, or twice or 3 times as much as I thought it was going to be, which is the way these things go. But there's simply, first of all, there's simply no media of these experiences. There are no photographs of him serving in Angola, the way there are photos of my father serving in Vietnam, for instance. There are no photos of him in high school, except for the one that I shared where I believe he's actually in middle school. There's one in the film where he's playing with Ernesto Simpson. And then there's one of him in college where he's playing the marimba, and that's it. So the stuff of him kind of like sneaking around trying to listen to Miami radio, or of the stuff of him serving in Angola and nearly losing his life but for a truck breaking down, those were things I had to bring to life. And as good a character as Omar is, and as shiny a person as he is, and as wonderful he is to spend time with, I needed some. Film is still a visual medium, no matter how much this would have made a great audio piece. I needed to have some something for the audience to look at during those segments, and luckily my animator based in Floating Pear, which is based in Pawtucket in Rhode Island, here in Rhode Island, did a fabulous job bringing those stories to life, those stories that I felt were really really important to bring forth in the story. So
yeah, well, go ahead, Bestor.
Well, I was going to say, animation, I think, initiates a sense of intimacy in a very different way than a lot of, verite documentaries could possibly do in terms of just live action or using archival. There's something very, you're aware of the interpretive nature of this narrative that's presented in the animation. And I think it draws you in because you're now listening so carefully to the voice to see how the animation and the voice are married with one another. I love the intimacy that animation just brings out of you as a person who's part of the audience. It's terrific.
Well, yeah, one wild visual for me in there in regards to the animation is him playing. So Omar Sosa's playing his piano with an AK on his strap, right? So it's like, yeah, okay, I guess that's what you got to do what you got to do, like, and I'm thinking, like, did he know how to use it? Like, did he have to go, did they just say, here, musician, take this, because those two don't normally go together. There's a lot of musicians.
Yeah, he wasn't fighting. I mean, he was there as an entertainer, but he was a regular in the Cuban military at that point. That was his mandatory service, and he went not only to Angola but and to Nicaragua and a few other places. There's not enough film to discuss all of them. I thought Angola was the most significant one for a number of reasons. The most obvious of which being that it's Africa and that the African continent informs so much of what he does musically.
Yeah, no, I just thought that was pretty brilliant, just visually to kind of see that. And also, so David, on that, so I kind of wanted to bring up your internet connection froze on us on Monday, but when we were talking about archival footage, Bestor, you kind of brought up that as well. So I kind of wanted to hear a little bit more from you. But David, because you did break up I know you were telling us about pretty much kind of being lucky that there was a lot of artists around that gave you permission, to use some of the footage and some of the music that you had. And I was wondering if you can kind of share a little bit more for folks that didn't really hear you, because you were just kind of talking about the licensing aspect of not really having the budget to be able to acquire a lot of the music if you had to. So you were kind of fortunate to be able to have some of that music at your disposal from local artists. Yeah, I think that's what I heard you say. So I just want you to correct me if I didn't.
For me, for years before I transitioned into doing documentary, I was a videographer. And I was a videographer, and my specialty was musicians, visual artists, poets, people that were just they needed some kind of visual presence. YouTube was kind of new at this day. So when I transitioned over into documentaries, these were the same people that I kind of went to. Actually, one of the reasons why I wanted to get into documentary, because I kept running into these fascinating people who had just incredible stories that were either just not being told, were either being ignored, or they were seen as commonplace that no one was really documenting. That's something you hear a lot about Chicago. It's like I had, a friend of mine who said, I was looking for stuff for house music, like posters and stuff. And I was like, can I borrow some stuff for, and he was like, I don't have anything left. We were too busy partying, no one documented anything. And so, but yeah, me being a videographer helped, and it goes to a point to anybody who's doing a documentary. This question is usually asked to people who are kind of new and getting into documentaries, like, what connection do you have to the community? Why are you in this community? Because sometimes you have people who don't have a connection, and that's one thing, but they don't have the right intentions of why they're going to the community. They're going in because they feel like it's, salacious, it will give them some kind of notoriety instead of respecting the community. And so I was fortunate enough, because I knew them and they knew me, knew my work, they were beyond gracious. They were, I call them up and say, hey, I'm doing this project. Yeah, sure. Come on. What day do you want to come? As far as licensing, I was still, some people were so good and so good to me that I was still explaining to them, and they had already signed it. They're like, yeah, here you go. It was like, that's the kind of group, because, Chicago is it's, third largest city, but but everyone kind of refers to it as a big town. Everybody knows each other. There's kind of a small town feel, and, there's community and everything. You are in that community and you've done right by that community, they let you in, they let you do it. So a lot of the things I got were because, people were like, I know you, we worked together on this. Here's some tracks, here you go. I'll sign off, here you go. When it's coming to interviews, they were just like, I know you, we worked together. You helped me with my EPK. We're friends, come here's a pass to come shoot me at this concert, or I'll sit down and do an interview. A lot of times the people I'm interviewing, they found locations for me. Here, I'm gonna be here. I'll secure it so we can do it and everything like that. And that's, to me, it's a testament of the artists, the community, the culture that has been built, that allowed me to do it. And without that, none of my projects are probably done without that kind of community connection and trust and kind of interaction.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's important for a couple of different factors. So the legal licensing aspect of things as a filmmaker, from a production standpoint, is something that you always have to be cognizant of, right? I'm a music supervisor myself. I'm a narrative advisor. The other point of having a connection to that community, being able to go in, because we're storytellers, right? So what better, like, your subject is going to feel so much more comfortable telling their story if they can trust you and connect you to where they come from, as far as understanding who they are. So I always find that that's huge. The other thing too, is the difference between house music and hip hop, where house music, again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, had less samples and less things like that in regards to the creation of it, versus hip hop that was driven from really samples and sampling other records. And that could be kind of tricky as well when it comes to licensing and getting clearances and things like that.
But there are a lot of, hip hop has a lot of samples. House has a lot of blends of different songs.
The vocal,
that can be tricky, because I remember the project I did before, it was also about house. And the first time, they said, okay, I had to count up the songs and figure out which ones I wanted licensing for. And initially I said, we counted about 10 songs. But what I was doing, it was a DJ's mix that had allowed, that I was using. Come to find out, the final count was like over 20. He had blended so many songs, different songs, they sounded like one song. So it was like, well, we thought we were going to have to get licensing for 10 songs, is now over 20, because of the way house DJs blend and mix songs and do stuff that you can't tell where one begins and one ends and everything. And so, it's different. But the one thing I think that also made it easy for every project is the level of talent. I was fortunate enough to know so many. It wasn't just I was going to people because I knew them and I didn't get these people, their music was incredible. If I had the choice, I would still have gone to these same people. I tell all people all the time, if you're looking for the best music in Chicago, it's like, don't go to Red. The best music in Chicago is not signed. the best artist, the best music, kind of like and everything else. It will not be somebody that's on a radio. It'll be somebody that you stumble into a club and hear them performing. And so, and I'm fortunate enough, I got fortunate enough to know some of those people, and they were gracious enough to just, to lend me just incredible songs, incredible music, just because of our past relationships.
So my other quick question to you, David, is: were you there? Were you, in that movement, in regards to your history with music and videography? Was that something that you experienced as well, which was part of?
Here's the thing about it, and you have to be very careful because Chicago people are very particular. I'm late 40s, and in the house world, that's considered a baby. That's considered. That's like, no, you weren't. They're like, literally, you weren't alive to really talk and everything. So when I'm talking to them, that's why I'm like very respectful. I just let people talk and allow them to tell their story, because house. The golden era was probably 70s, then the rebirth in the 80s after after the whole disco sucks things and everything, and then house had to recreate itself after that. And so those were kind of the heydays. So I'm considered too young to be of any of the memorable stuff. And that's why when I'm talking to legends, I'm very clear. Listen, I'm the guy with the camera. I'm the guy trying to capture your stories. I'm not, I just let them talk and tell what was the warehouse like, what was Den 1 like, and let them tell stories. And for me, it's a question of finding the consistency in the story. Because it's kind of weird, like I was saying before, you're part of the community, you're connected to community, but you're also at an age where a lot of stuff happened before. So in that situation, the best thing to do is allow people to talk, allow them to tell their stories, and then truth is consistent. So when you see the same consistent story from this person to this person, it kind of lends, okay, this is kind of where it was. So.
Yeah, I thought about that because Jay Starr in the film that's actually talking about being 21 years old and the acceptance. Yeah. I thought that was pretty interesting. So Bestor, if I could, go to you, your film as well, like, archival footage. I mean, and especially the fact that James Cotton's, life was, going downhill and he was deteriorating. What was that experience like? How did you have to go about acquiring the footage and interviews and things like that? And again, I mentioned on Monday about James Montgomery that I know here. I'm like, whoa, this is kind of cool. Like, this stuff is, it all makes sense. It's all glued together in the film. But when you think about it from this standpoint, what was that experience like?
Well, very briefly, James Montgomery and I, we decided to do a tribute concert for James Cotton after he passed. Mm-hmm. And we decided that we would do that concert both not for an audience and for an audience. And so we went down to Fall River. We had a warehouse down there, and we brought in about 20 different musicians, almost all of them harp players, plus James had his band in. And we did a kind of a chat session in which various different musicians, like groups of 8 or so, were just sitting around and having a very kind of conversational experience of just remembering Cotton, but sharing some of the songs that they attributed to Cotton and were a part of their own lives. And then we did a concert afterwards the next day. And in between that, I did interviews with about 16 of the 20 or so musicians that came in. And they came in from the West Coast and from the East Coast, from the South, and from Chicago and Rhode Island. So we had kind of the basis of sort of a documentary approach towards the story of James Cotton. And from that, we began to tease out sort of the notion of how this film could work. We wanted it not to necessarily be just strictly an archival film. We wanted to have something that breathed both a sense of honoring Cotton today, and a sense of his influence and the legacy that he had left. But we also realized that there were ways in which part of his story had to come through with archive. And we met a photographer out in Chicago who documented during the 70s particularly, but the late 60s, 70s into the 80s, the various different clubs, particularly in the Black neighborhoods, where folks would get together as is described in the movie, on a Saturday night, there might be 40 different clubs in which musicians are getting down with the blues in various different parts of Chicago. And that photographer had an extraordinary archive of stills of Cotton. And so that became another element for bringing the film alive. Instead of animation, this was another form of intimacy where you see really sort of a street photographer's approach towards revealing sort of a sense of what life was like at that particular time. And so it was kind of building upon these different elements that we had. As we kept on going further, we would find other archival elements, and we begin to, you just did a lot of research to unearth things that were not so familiar. I mean, you do start sort of on the web, and you can find a lot of stuff on the web, but you want to go beyond that as well. There is a lot of stuff on the web that ends up making it into the film in one way or another. But it was an iterative process of seeing how what we started out with, which was kind of this sense of honoring his legacy, and then building upon that as a way in which to get into a full story of his life, but also how the transformation of his life became sort of a transformation that took place in this country.
Oh, that's amazing. Just to say to our audience, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop any of those questions in the chat. And hopefully, I'm not sure what time we have, but I know we've gone all over our intended time. Is there anything else? Well, actually, I know one question I meant to ask on Monday is, how long did it take you guys to do these productions from start to finish? I'm not sure if we talked about that at all. I think we touched on it, but Soren, if you can go ahead with that one, just kind of give us a bit of a timeline and what that experience was.
Yeah, I mean, this is the second feature that I've made, and both of them took 10 years from beginning to end. So I don't have that many in me apparently. But I had a really good experience in 2013, the first concert that we filmed of Omar's, and the first interview that we did of Omar's. And then it became, well, it was going to be not, cost prohibitive to follow him around because he goes from country to country. He's just all over the place. And it wasn't going to be a thing that we could probably do efficiently or and get what we needed. And so rather the idea was like, well, he plays with these different bands and these different kind of configurations. So he plays in duo with Paolo Fresu, he plays solo concert, he plays with a trio, oftentimes he plays with a quartet, he plays with a quintet. I saw him we filmed him with a sextet. So he's always playing with different band configurations. He has 2 big band albums. I mean, it's kind of like it's hard to follow the different files of activity that this guy's part of. So we sort of waited for him to come to us as a means of saying, well, I'll organize what I want to do and figure out what I want to ask him in the interim, and then he'll come around and play at Club Helsinki in Hudson or Berkeley Performance Center or the Blue Note in New York. And we just got lucky enough that everybody that we asked said yes to filming there, and their management was super nice and let us have backstage access and places to film and all that stuff. But yeah, it took, from beginning to end, basically 10 years. I mean, we're coming up on 10 years. February of 2013 was the first concert that we shot. And again, just to touch on the just very quickly, I mean, obviously we all had COVID interrupt these films for whether it was months or years, likely years. But these things do take time. But one of the extremely euphoric things about it. For me, with the archival material, just going back to the previous subject, if you'll allow me, Scott Price, Omar's manager, to whom I owe, you know, any access that I had to Omar and his collaborators, sent me a box of every kind of media you can imagine, you know, VHS and, you know, beta and digibeta and high 8 and all these different kinds of, you know, now kind of aging or you know, completely dead media types or film types. And I had them transferred and started going through them, and the moments in the film where, you know, there's that connection that Bestor was speaking of about, you know, where the animation matches what's being said. Well, I got lucky enough to find archival material that did that precise thing as well. So there's a story that of the first time he met Paolo Fresu, and played at a festival with him in Berchita, Sardinia, I think in 2007, that he surprised Omar by getting into a tree right above where he was playing and blowing his trumpet down at him playing solo piano. And that was the first time they played together, essentially. You know, so, and I had that on video. It was a great story without it, but wow, when I realized I had that and ripped a DVD that actually had that moment on it, that was sort of catnip for a filmmaker, being able to find stuff like that. So yeah, but yeah, I just wanted to quickly touch on that archival thing. But yeah, it's coming up on 10 years. It's the second they overlapped. My first film took 2006 to 2016, and this one's looking like 2013 to 2023. So with a short wedged in there. So yeah, and a lot of other freelance activity. Yeah.
Were there like the cultural differences and language barriers? Did that play a part in that as well?
No, I mean, his English is pretty near perfect. I mean, I don't really have, I know some people have trouble understanding Scottish accents and stuff. I mean, I don't generally, I watch a lot of movies, so I don't really have problems understanding any kind of accents. I mean, you know, somebody's making the effort. I don't speak a lick of Spanish, so I can understand like every 30th word or something. So he didn't request to actually for me to interview him where he spoke Spanish until the fourth time we sat together. He was expecting it just to be once or twice, of course. And by the fourth time, he said, "Do you mind if I speak Spanish?" And I said, "No problem." You know, so his manager sat in there and translated it for me. And similarly with interviews that I did in Spanish, I would have like Chucho Valdez spoke only in Spanish. His English isn't as good as Omar's, and was very. He said, you know, let's speak in Spanish. And I said that's fine. And his wife sat out with us and he hung out and translated. And similarly with Gustavo Avales, the percussionist, and Leandro St. Hill, I just had Omar's manager in the room kind of feeding me phrases and stuff like that. But I picked out enough that it wasn't an issue, and I had it translated so I could do the subtitles.
Very cool. We could go on with that one, but
yeah.
I'll kick over to David. There's so much that, you know, this is very interesting. How about your experience with this film, David? And making the film and the duration of that.
A lot of my projects, I would probably say there's footage in this that's, you know, as far back as 7 years old. Because of my videography background, a lot of times I have a lot of archive footage of the same people, so I'm able to pull from that 7 years. But for me, I always try to narrow a project down where I realize the real bulk of my shooting is going to be a 1 or 1.5 year process. Like I try to keep, so it's kind of keeping it topical, keeping it kind of current. So I usually do a lot of the, you know, around an event that's about a year or so. Even though it's footage from years back that are incorporated to, you know, the kind of the story, the personal narrative is usually about a year or so old. Of course, this one ended up being 2 years, a lot of it because of the pandemic. The third act was supposed to be what they call summertime shy, you know, just the summer in Chicago and everything's going on and kind of showing the two cultures. But that summer was 2020 and everything shut down. And so I had to come back, and a few things were going on in 2021 with a number of restrictions. And so I kind of did, so that's the reason why I changed the entire third act. 2020, because to me, 2020 was a metaphor for both cultures. It was one more obstacle that they had to overcome. And so it seemed like, you know, instead of just trying to wait until this was all over, you know, incorporate what's happening right now and how it's affecting, you know, how it's forced both cultures to kind of reevaluate. You know, both of them are very social and get together, and, you know, some house DJs say, I don't want to spin in a venue that's too big because I need people close. You know, you need that kind of tight kind of room, and to go from that kind of mindset to now, you know, and see how they adjusted. So I would say it was supposed to be 1 year, but you know, altogether about a little over 2 years to really do it, even though there's 7-year-old footage and stuff in there.
Which is rather quick for documentaries, anyway.
Yeah, it was. It felt quick. It felt like every day I was on the road trying to interview somebody.
David wins, I think. If we're playing golf rules, like I think David wins, like the shortest, right?
Yeah.
The thing that I've learned, though, the way, you know, the most important thing is getting yourself a deadline to finish the damn thing. And there's nothing like getting accepted in a film festival to know, oh, I got to get this finished now. That really makes decision happening right on time.
Exactly. Thank you, film festivals, because we would just it'd be another 15 years.
That doesn't even matter to me. Yesterday at the screening, I was telling everybody it's not finished yet. They were like, "Oh," I was like, "Yeah." Omar keeps suggesting people for me to interview, so even the deadline doesn't do any good for me. I still have to keep working.
Yeah, that's the other reality. Bestor, what was your total duration for that film?
Oh, you know, it depends which way you start the measurement. It could have been 15 years. It could have been 10 years. You know, we started shooting in 2019, then got shut down during the pandemic in 2020 for sure. Came back up in 2021 to finish, you know, and literally, I think we finished the film at the end of 2021, and then was just doing licensing in 2022 when all of a sudden our great friends here at the Roxbury Film Festival said, "Hey, we want to screen this film," and so you got to get it ready.
Nice. Go easy, Soren. Go easy over there.
Oh, I'm already thinking about the third feature. I'm going to be 6 years old by the time I finish it. Yeah.
So we have a couple of questions coming in, and again, I just want to be mindful of the time. But Michelle Ferguson, she actually makes a comment. Thank you for this wonderful and informative conversation. What was the most amazing thing you learned about your film? Take it away, Soren.
I assume the most amazing thing about my film, or about my
subject? That you learned. I'm assuming that she's saying like
learned while I was
that you learned.
Yeah. I mean, I think I just like I mentioned this yesterday at the Q&A after the screening. I had this kind of the first when I was interviewing Omar for the first time, he had just cut the record. It's called Alma with the Italian trumpeter Paolo Fresu. And you know, who's also in the film, and they record a cover on this record Alma of Paul Simon's Under African Skies, and so when I went to interview Omar, you know, I sort of was thinking, oh, he must really love Paul Simon, or he must have really liked the Graceland record, and you know, this is this huge record, you know, with Ladysmith Back Mambazo on it. It has Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes and these big songs, and everybody in my neighborhood, every person's parents had it when I was growing up. That's how big a record this was, so I get on the Skype with him and I start talking to him, and I said, oh, you know, you did this. I had this great, you know, sort of music journalist question to ask him, which is like, you know, you did this cover of Under African Skies. You know, what do you like are you a fan of that record? Do you like Paul Simon? Like, how did you get that record? And he said, I've never heard Graceland in my life, and I still haven't actually. So he had actually, Paolo brought in that song Under African Skies and a little ostinato, or a little rhythmic figure, or a melodic figure. And I think Omar might have listened to the song once, and he said, I don't want to hear it again if we're going to do a cover of it. I just want to like bring my own thing to it. And then he said at that point he still hadn't listened to Graceland. And I don't mean that was the most amazing thing or the most surprising thing, but it was emblematic of how much I took for granted in how I was brought up musically, and even how much access I had to popular music. And now we have access to, you know, every kind of music at our fingertips on Spotify or Apple Music or Amazon or whatever streaming DSPs. And so, you know, but to realize again, like how much Omar and Cubans in general, according to one of my interview subjects in a soundbite that didn't make it into the film, but Ned Sublett, who wrote an authoritative history of Cuban music called Cuba and Its Music, and it's a 600-page long book. You know, he says that Cubans can do a lot with a little, and they really squeezed a lot of juice out of that mango when they had the chance. It was sort of like he realized that, like, the resourcefulness of these composers and these students was something that, you know, you almost can't believe what they did with so very little, and it's hard for us to do something with so very much. I think, when I say us, I mean the royal we's, for anybody. So Omar did a lot with a little, and that was a thing that continued to surprise me and continued to engage me about the story, and I wanted to make sure that came through in the film.
That's awesome. David, you know, what's something that we'll all be shocked to find out that you learned?
It wasn't really a shock. It was almost like a confirmation, and it was how much, even though the two genres seemed separate, how connected they were. Like, you know, house heads telling me, like, you know, I was a hip hop person, and then I went into house, and then hip hop people telling me, you know, I would quietly sneak into house clubs. You know, I was a hip hop person, everything.
Yeah.
And so it showed, and it reaffirmed that even though they both loved their cultures, and they loved Chicago, and they put it in there, and it was just finding out how closely related they were. Like I said, I did a documentary before on house before I did this one, and what the subject in that one, he summed it up. I think he had the best quote about it. He basically said, funk and disco had two babies. One went to New York, one went to Chicago. And he was talking about house and hip hop. Mm-hmm. And he's saying is like they are, and that's what came out through the documentary, is that they are really closely related. They're even birth, you know, the kind of time is almost similar, you know, but they've just gone in these two different routes. And so seeing in detail how closely related they were, and their origins were, and how they were kind of birthed in two different regions, but almost for the same reasons. Mm-hmm. I think was just fascinating for me, and it really was something that drove home, that I took away from the project, and so that was refreshing. You know, it was fun to see.
I thought that was interesting because they're two fairly young genres of music, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just even the conversation that, you know, that when they're saying the house heads didn't want to be perceived a certain way because they're dancing a certain way, right? So mm-hmm. they don't want to be perceived from the hip hop community as whatever people would, you know, think they are, you know, which is kind of interesting. You think about house again, like I kind of remember it and everything else, but I didn't understand the culture of it at all. So that was pretty cool watching the film and really kind of understanding, even like, why is it called house? You know, things like that.
Right.
That was the start of like, what are you talking about? Like, I didn't know there was an answer to that question, you know? Yeah. So
there really isn't. Like I said, that's why I put that in there, because it's like, you ask 5 people, there's a good chance you're going to hear 5 different answers. And they're passionate about all 5. So that's why I said, I'm just gonna put them out there. You choose whichever one you like.
Yeah, the best of yours is like super duper historical. You know, it just you know, again, the issues of race and everything else that are like right in your face throughout the whole film. Really, you know, even you know, his wife and everything else. That's actually, you know, his manager, you know, that kind of thing, where it's like, well, how did that happen? And anyway, so that's just, again, I'm just kind of excited about all 3 of these films because I got a chance to check them out. But what's something that you can share with us, Bestor, as well?
You know, often it's the details that are so surprising. And for me, an original detail, which I learned from James Montgomery when we got started, was that the harmonica, the harp, is the only instrument you can't see when you play it.
Mm.
And I just had never really processed that. And, you know, it's like all other instruments, the musician has an opportunity to kind of at least see what it is that they're manipulating in order to be able to make the sounds and the rhythms that they're creating. But the harp, you know, it's all in the breathing and sort of the extension of one's lungs that enable, and the connection to the brain that enable the sounds to take place that are part of the harp. It's not like you get to see, and if anything, you most of us can't even see the harp being played when it's being played, because a good harp player is doing all sorts of things with their hands to kind of cover, to create different tones and sounds and bend notes that are occurring both within the mouth, but also with the physicality of how you're playing. So for me, this was just paying attention to the details. And I said, wow, I just, that startled me.
That's a strong point, because even as a musician, a lot of musicians hide behind their instrument, you know, and that's something that people may or may not know, and they only feel comfortable when they're on stage playing that instrument because they become one with the instrument, versus the harp or harmonica, which that individual has to be that sound, right? It just comes throughout there, you know, so it gets projected through them. And just like, I don't want to tell the film, because I know some people have seen it, but I think, you know, definitely want to encourage people to check that out and really find out what we're talking about, the story behind that. It's just very, very interesting for what we think. And again, me as a musician, I'm like, yeah, you know, harp, Stevie Wonder, yeah, he plays that. You know, he's like really neat and clean, you know, or the guys that have it in front of them when they're doing multitasking, you know, it's a completely different vibe. You know, watching a film, you're like, oh shoot, that's where this stuff comes from, you know. Anyway, so we have another couple of questions. You guys know I'll sit here with you all night, you know, forget about the time clock. But Hugh Mannon, he also makes the comment of thanks for a great conversation. Would love to hear each filmmaker's favorite or most formative for you guys. What's your most favorite music doc? And let me see what these other questions are for sake of time. Maybe we can try to answer both. So the first one is, what's your most favorite, your most favorite music doc? Did any of you consider or actually create a music video with one of your artist's songs using footage from the film or outtakes? So what's your favorite doc, and have you done anything like that with any outtakes, film footage, B-roll, that kind of thing? Obviously James Cotton would be, actually you could do something with one of his songs, you know, if you decided to do that. But did you consider that? And what's your favorite doc? Music doc. Two separate questions.
I mean, you know, the film festival's going on right now. I haven't had a chance to think about what I would do with the outtakes, but they're still, you know, being gathered together and figured out what else is there. I mean, there are so many different stories that you can make out of the one film that you've done. You could spend the rest of your life just making other stories, because they are so, you know, a story begets a story begets a story, and we just go off on lots of tangential things. You know, I would just be throwing out a favorite doc if I, you know, there are just so many, but I think Buena Vista Social Club has got to be right up there.
Cool. How about you, Soren?
Yeah, first of all, just saying hello to Hugh Mannon, who's my department chair and friend, and the person that hired me at Clark University 6-7 years ago or something. But I think it might surprise you to hear that one of my favorite music documentaries is Some Kind of Monster by Joe Berlinger and Bruce Sinofsky, which is about Metallica. And I just have to be honest, because I've seen it dozens of times. And there's something so kind of profound, but also ridiculous about it at the same time. And I grew up loving Metallica since, you know, around middle school. And, you know, but I said this the other night, on Monday night, I like all music. I really like them, even if they're trashy and terrible. I mean, I'm watching the Machine Gun Kelly documentary, My Life in Pink, on Hulu right now. And I just paused it to start doing this. So, you know, I watch all of them, like as many as I can. I really like the genre a lot, and to contribute even in the small way that I have is pretty unbelievable. I love Dig by Andy Timiner, which is about the Dandy Warhols and the Brian Jonestown Massacre and their sort of competition with each other. These two kind of aughts rock bands. You know, but I Am Trying to Break Your Heart, the Wilco movie, I really love. You know, so there's a lot of them that I do love. I hate to cop out like that, but yeah, I dig a lot of them for sure. What was the other question? Sorry. Oh, outtakes. I actually have worked for Omar's manager a few times, putting together when they've got a multicam like concert that they've got, they've got camera angles and they want me to put something together. So I've done some of that for his YouTube channel. I always want to put the full version of the song on, and the manager always wants me to put like a cut down version to like show promoters and stuff. So we meet in the middle, and I do my version and he can have his version. But I never really, not a traditional, not in this, to the extent that there is a traditional music video, not something where I sort of filmed him walking around and, or performing or lip syncing or playing and not playing. He's pretty pure when it comes to that stuff. He's got a few music videos, but I did not direct any of them, and nor do I think I would probably do them justice. It's a different discipline for sure.
Cool. How about you, David? Oh.
But the artistic barter system in Chicago is really real. So yeah, I've done stuff, and it was just like, somebody would ask me, it's like, hey, do you have any footage? We need a promo for something. I've done promos. I've done music videos. I have done music video based off of footage or shot something later or something. And that kind of, promos, music videos, little concert stuff, out of extra footage I was used to. And to me, it was the least I can do. They're giving me this time. And that's one of the things I thought was cool about kind of like Chicago artist culture, that there's this barter system. Oh, you need music? Here you go. Here's some tracks. I need an EPK. Cool. I'll shoot your EPK and that nature. So that's so I have done that. As far as documentaries, there's some other smaller ones, but I would have to go with I Called Him Morgan. I just love the way that documentary developed. I mean, it was, gut-wrenching sad, but it was just the way it was formulated, the way, they did it. I just really appreciated how I Called Him Morgan was put together. So that's mine that I really enjoyed.
That's a great one. I second that one for sure.
Awesome. Well, once again, I want to congratulate all three of you gentlemen for amazing films. And I want to encourage everyone out there to actually take a look at them. We are here with David Weathersby. It's different in Chicago. Sorry about that. Bestor Cram, Bonnie Blue, James Cotton's Life in the Blues, and Soren Sorensen, Omar Sosa's 88 Well-Tuned Drums. And all of those films are like just really awesome, very different. And if you've seen it already, thank you. And if you have not, please do. Big thanks to Lisa Simmons and the Roxbury Film Festival. And my name is Malik Williams from the Secret Society of Black Creatives. And I look forward to continuing this conversation in the future and seeing, best of luck with all your films.
Thanks, Malik.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me with you guys. It was really cool.
I could talk to the three of you for the next 4 hours. Yeah, that would be easy.
Well, I think we should just do it. You know what I mean? Because at the end, we could order some food and just hang out.
Let me charge up this phone. I'm good. Let's go.
Yeah.
All right, you know what? I think now I'm going to have to do a podcast. We're going to have to do like a podcast thing.
Let's do it, Lisa. You got me here. I can't say no.